The gunshot that struck Olivia O'Connor wasn't meant for her, but the searing pain in her shoulder didn't care about intentions. Blood soaked through her calico dress as she collapsed behind the overturned wagon, chaos erupting around her in what had been, just moments before, the peaceful main street of Wheatland, Wyoming. It was the spring of 1879, and the range war that had been brewing between the cattle barons of the Silver Creek Grazing Association and the homesteaders trying to fence off their claims had finally erupted into open violence. Olivia, the town schoolteacher, had simply been walking to the mercantile when the first shots rang out. "Stay down," a man's voice commanded as another volley of bullets splintered the wagon beside her. Through tear-filled eyes, Olivia looked up to see Lucas James, his face half hidden by the brim of his Stetson, pistol drawn as he crouched beside her. She'd seen him around town, of course the quiet cowboy who worked for the Rockingham, one of the smaller spreads caught between the warring factions. "You're hit," he said, his eyes widening at the blood staining her dress. "I can't," Olivia tried to speak, but the words dissolved into a gasp of pain. Lucas holstered his gun and scooped her up in one fluid motion. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as another round of gunfire erupted. With her pressed against his chest, Lucas waited for a break in the shooting, then darted across the street toward the alleyway between the bank and the feed store. Bullets kicked up dust at his heels, but he didn't slow his stride until they were safely behind the building. "Mr. James," she managed, her voice thin with pain. "Why are you—" "Questions later, Miss O'Connor," he interrupted, his eyes scanning the street. "Right now, we need to get you to Doc Wilson before you bleed out on your favorite dress." Despite the agony radiating from her shoulder, Olivia couldn't help but notice how confidently he held her, how his heart pounded steadily against her cheek. She'd always thought of Lucas James as just another cowboy handsome enough with those clear blue eyes and sun-bronzed skin, but unremarkable in a town full of hard-working men. Now, as he carried her through the back ways of Wheatland, away from the gunfire and toward safety, she wondered how she could have been so wrong. What neither of them realized as Lucas kicked open the door to the doctor's office was that this chance encounter, this moment when a stray bullet found an innocent schoolteacher and a cowboy happened to be close enough to help, would change both their lives forever. "Doctor." Wilson looked up from his desk, startled by the sudden intrusion. His spectacles slipped down his nose as he took in the sight of Lucas carrying the bleeding schoolteacher. "Good Lord! What happened?" he exclaimed, immediately clearing papers from the examination table. "Range war finally came to town," Lucas explained tersely, gently laying Olivia down. "Miss O'Connor was caught in the crossfire, bullet to the shoulder." The doctor moved swiftly, examining the wound as Olivia bit her lip to keep from crying out. "You were lucky, young lady." "A few inches to the right." He didn't finish the thought, but he didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew what he meant. "Can you help her?" Lucas asked, his voice tight with concern. "Of course I can," Dr. Wilson replied, already gathering his instruments, "but I'll need your assistance." "My nurse is visiting her sister in Cheyenne." Lucas nodded, removing his hat and rolling up his sleeves. "Tell me what to do." Olivia's eyes widened in alarm. "Perhaps someone else could." "No time," the doctor cut in. "That bullet needs to come out now." For the next hour, Lucas stood by, following the doctor's instructions, holding Olivia still when necessary, wiping her brow, offering words of encouragement when the pain became too much. When the doctor finally extracted the bullet, a .44 caliber slug that had thankfully missed any vital structures, Olivia had passed out from the pain, her hand still gripping Lucas's with surprising strength. "She's a fighter," Dr. Wilson commented as he stitched the wound closed. Most women would have screamed the roof down. Lucas nodded, his eyes never leaving Olivia's pale face. Will she recover fully? With proper care, yes, but she'll need looking after for a few days at least. She lives alone above the schoolhouse, doesn't she? She does. The doctor sighed. Not ideal. She shouldn't be climbing those stairs or trying to manage on her own, not with that shoulder. Lucas stared at Olivia's face for a long moment before saying, "She won't have to. I'll take her to my place outside of town. It's small, but it's all on one level and I can keep an eye on her." Dr. Wilson raised his eyebrows. "That's mighty considerate of you, Lucas, but what will people say? An unmarried woman staying with a bachelor." Lucas's expression hardened. "People can say what they like. I'm not leaving her to fend for herself, and that's final." The doctor studied the young cowboy for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let me prepare some laudanum for the pain and instructions for her care. She'll need the dressing changed twice daily. As doctor." Wilson gathered the necessary supplies. Lucas gently brushed a strand of copper hair from Olivia's forehead. In the 3 years she'd been teaching in Wheatland, they'd rarely exchanged more than polite greetings when their paths crossed in town. Now, looking at her sleeping face, he felt a protectiveness he couldn't explain. When Olivia finally began to stir, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the doctor's office windows. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of warm honey. "Welcome back," Lucas said softly. Confusion crossed her features. "Mr. James, you're still here. Didn't seem right to leave," he replied simply. Dr. Wilson approached the table. "Miss O'Connor, how are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," she admitted, wincing as she tried to shift position. "Not surprising. The bullet's out, but you've got some healing to do," the doctor explained. "I've discussed it with Mr. James, and we both agree you shouldn't be alone right now." Alarm flashed across Olivia's face. "I appreciate the concern, but I'll be fine at my own place." "The children, school's canceled until things settle down," the doctor informed her. "Mayor's orders after today's shooting, and you're in no condition to climb those stairs to your rooms, let alone teach." Lucas cleared his throat. "I've got a small place about 3 miles outside of town. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet and away from any trouble. I'm offering to look after you there until you're back on your feet." Olivia's eyes widened. "That's very kind, Mr. James, but entirely inappropriate." "I couldn't possibly, Miss O'Connor," Lucas interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "Those weren't just random shots today. The range war that's been threatening for months is here, and town isn't safe, especially for someone who can't defend herself right now." "He's right," Dr. Wilson added. "And Lucas's place is well away from the disputed grazing lands. You'd be safer there than anywhere in town." Olivia looked between the two men, realizing they'd already made up their minds. "I have no say in this, do I?" "You always have a say," Lucas responded, "but I'm asking you to trust me." Something in his steady gaze, a sincerity, a quiet determination made Olivia reconsider. She'd always prided herself on her independence, having come west on her own after losing her parents. But perhaps accepting help wasn't a weakness after all. "Very well, Mr. James," she finally conceded. "But only until I can manage on my own." Relief flooded Lucas's features. "That's all I ask." As dusk settled over Wheatland, Lucas made arrangements to transport Olivia to his homestead. He borrowed the doctor's buggy, padding the seat with blankets to make it as comfortable as possible for his injured passenger. Dr. Wilson provided laudanum for the pain and fresh bandages, along with strict instructions for Olivia's care. Before they departed, Sheriff Parker arrived at the doctor's office, his weathered face grim. "Heard about what happened, Miss O'Connor," he said, removing his hat. Damnable business, civilians getting caught in the middle. Do you know who was responsible? Lucas asked, his voice tight. The sheriff shook his head. Too much confusion. Could have been either side, the association men or the homesteaders. We've got 2 dead, 4 wounded, not counting Miss O'Connor here. And what are you doing about it? Lucas pressed. Sent wires to the governor requesting assistance. Until then, I've deputized a few men to keep the peace. Sheriff Parker turned to Olivia. I'll need a statement from you when you're feeling up to it, madam. Of course, Sheriff, she replied weakly. After the sheriff departed, Lucas carefully helped Olivia into the buggy. The movement caused fresh pain to radiate from her shoulder, and she couldn't suppress a small cry. I'm sorry, Lucas murmured, his face close to hers as he adjusted the blankets around her. It won't be a smooth ride, but I'll go as carefully as I can. As they left town, Olivia noticed how quiet the streets had become. Normally, at this hour, the saloon would be coming to life, and folks would be heading to the hotel restaurant for supper. Tonight, doors were closed, windows shuttered. The violence had cast a pall over Wheatland. It won't always be like this, Lucas said, as if reading her thoughts. People have short memories. In a week or 2, they'll forget to be afraid. And the range war? Olivia asked. Lucas's expression darkened. That won't be over so quickly. Too much at stake. The journey to Lucas's homestead took longer than normal, as he carefully navigated the rutted road to avoid jostling his passenger. By the time they arrived, full night had fallen, and Olivia was barely conscious, the laudanum having taken effect. Lucas's home was modest, but well-built, a 1-room cabin with a small lean-to addition. A corral and barn stood nearby, and a creek wound its way along the eastern edge of the property. In the moonlight, Olivia could make out a vegetable garden and what appeared to be fruit trees. It's not much, Lucas said as he halted the buggy. But it's mine, free and clear. It's lovely, Olivia murmured, meaning it despite her pain-addled state. With gentle hands, Lucas lifted her from the buggy and carried her inside. The cabin was simple but neat, a cast iron stove in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, shelves with a few books and supplies, and a bed covered with a colorful quilt against the far wall. You'll take the bed, Lucas stated, carefully depositing her on the edge of the mattress. I'll sleep in the lean-to with my gear. Too exhausted to argue, Olivia simply nodded. Lucas helped her remove her boots, but beyond that, propriety dictated she remain clothed. He provided a nightgown he'd hastily purchased from the mercantile before leaving town, placing it beside her. I'll step outside while you change what you can, he said. Call when you're ready and I'll help with the rest. Alone in the cabin, Olivia managed to unbutton the front of her ruined dress with her good hand, but removing it proved impossible without causing excruciating pain. When Lucas returned, he helped her with clinical efficiency, keeping his eyes averted as much as possible while assisting her into the nightgown. Despite his care, the process left Olivia trembling with pain and embarrassment. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm not usually so helpless. You took a bullet today, Lucas reminded her, tucking the quilt around her. I reckon that earns you a day or 2 of being looked after. He stoked the fire in the stove, then prepared a simple meal of beans and bacon. Olivia tried to eat but found her appetite lacking. The laudanum made her drowsy, and soon she was drifting off to sleep, vaguely aware of Lucas moving quietly around the cabin. Her last conscious thought before succumbing to slumber was how strange life could be that morning. Lucas James had been a near stranger, and now she was sleeping in his bed, utterly dependent on his care. The next few days established a routine. Lucas would rise before dawn to tend to his small herd of cattle and the other animals, returning to check on Olivia and change her bandages. Despite her protests, He insisted on doing most of the work around the cabin, allowing her to rest and heal. On the third morning, Olivia awoke feeling stronger than she had since the shooting. Through the window, she could see Lucas chopping wood, his movements steady and efficient. Without his customary hat, his dark blonde hair caught the early sun, and she found herself watching the play of muscles across his back as he worked. When he returned inside, she was sitting up in bed, attempting to brush her hair one-handed. "Here, let me help with that," he offered, setting down the armload of wood. "I can manage," Olivia insisted. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You're yanking your head sideways with every stroke and probably undoing all of Doc Wilson's good work. Just let me help." Reluctantly, Olivia handed over the brush. With surprising gentleness, Lucas began to work through the tangles in her long copper hair. His touch was careful, almost reverent, and Olivia found herself relaxing despite her initial discomfort. "Where did you learn to brush a woman's hair?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. A sad smile crossed Lucas's face. "My mother. She was bedridden the last year of her life, cancer. I was 15 and my father had already passed. It was just the two of us on our farm in Missouri." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "It must have been difficult." Lucas nodded, continuing his methodical brushing. "It was. But she never complained, not once. After she was gone, I sold the farm and headed west. Worked my way from ranch to ranch until I ended up here 3 years ago. The same time I arrived to take the teaching position," Olivia noted. "I remember," Lucas said, surprising her. "You got off the stage wearing that blue dress with little white flowers. Half the unmarried men in town suddenly developed an interest in education." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "And you? Were you also suddenly interested in education?" Lucas's hands paused in their work. "I knew right away you were too fine for the likes of me," he admitted quietly. "A proper lady with learning and manners." "I figured the best I could hope for was a polite nod when we passed on the street." The honesty in his voice touched something deep within Olivia. Before she could respond, however, a knock sounded at the door. Lucas immediately tensed, setting aside the brush and retrieving his revolver from its holster hanging near the door. "Who's there?" he called. "It's Doc Wilson," came the reply. "Came to check on my patient." Relief crossed Lucas's face as he opened the door to admit the doctor, who carried his medical bag and a basket covered with a cloth. "Mrs. Thornton from the hotel sent along some food," Dr. Wilson explained, setting down the basket. "Word's gotten around about your predicament, Miss O'Connor. The ladies of the town are quite concerned about you." "That's very kind," Olivia said, smoothing her hair self-consciously. The doctor examined her wound, nodding with satisfaction at what he found. "Healing nicely. No signs of infection. You've done good work here, Lucas." "Just followed your instructions," Lucas replied modestly. "How are things in town?" Olivia asked as the doctor rebandaged her shoulder. Dr. Wilson's expression grew somber. "Tense. The Silver Creek Association has brought in some hired guns from Cheyenne. The homesteaders are banding together too. Sheriff's doing what he can, but—" he shrugged helplessly. "Everyone's choosing sides." "And which side are you on, Lucas?" Olivia asked suddenly, realizing she didn't know where he stood in the conflict. Lucas met her gaze steadily. "Neither. I work for the Rockingham, and Mr. Mullins has managed to stay neutral so far. He believes there's room for both cattle and crops if people would just be reasonable." "A sensible man," the doctor commented. "Unfortunately in short supply these days." After the doctor departed, promising to return in a few days, Olivia found herself contemplating Lucas's position. Most cowboys were fiercely loyal to the cattle interests, viewing homesteaders as intruders on the open range. That Lucas could see both sides spoke to a fairness of mind she hadn't expected. As the days passed, Olivia's strength gradually returned. She began moving around the cabin, insisting on helping with small tasks despite Lucas's protests. They fell into an easy companionship, sharing meals and conversation. In the evenings, Lucas would read aloud from one of his few books, mostly adventure tales, and a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that had belonged to his mother. A week after the shooting, Olivia was sitting on the small porch Lucas had built, enjoying the afternoon sunshine when he approached from the corral. "I need to ride into town for supplies," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Will you be all right on your own for a few hours?" Olivia nodded. "Of course. I'm much better now, thanks to your care. Keep the door locked," he advised, "and my rifle is loaded by the bed just in case." After Lucas rode off, Olivia found herself missing his presence more than she'd anticipated. The cabin seemed strangely empty without him moving about, humming tunelessly as he worked. She realized with a start how accustomed she'd grown to having him near. To distract herself, she decided to prepare supper as a surprise. Lucas had been doing all the cooking, and while his meals were simple, they were surprisingly tasty. Using her good arm, she managed to peel potatoes and prepare a stew with the remaining meat from the basket Mrs. Thornton had sent. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice the approaching riders until they were almost at the cabin. Looking out the window, she saw 3 men on horseback, none of whom she recognized. They weren't dressed like cowboys, but rather in the clothing of town men's suits that had seen better days and bowler hats. A flutter of unease went through Olivia as one of them dismounted and approached the door. Remembering Lucas's warning, she retrieved the rifle, holding it awkwardly with her good arm before calling out, "Who's there?" "Madam, we're looking for Lucas James," a deep voice responded. "Is he about?" "Mr. James isn't here," Olivia replied, keeping her voice steady. "What business do you have with him?" There was a pause then. "We represent the Silver Creek Grazing Association. We just want to have a friendly chat with him about where his loyalties lie in the current situation." The implied threat in the man's tone was unmistakable. Olivia tightened her grip on the rifle. "As I said, he isn't here. I suggest you gentlemen move along." A low chuckle came from the other side of the door. "Now, madam, that's not very hospitable. Why don't you open up so we can wait for him properly?" "I think not," Olivia replied firmly. "Please leave this property at once." The doorknob rattled as the man tested it, finding it locked. "You hear that, boys? The schoolmarm's giving us orders now." More laughter followed. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I have a rifle trained on this door," she called out. "The next man who touches it will regret it." The rattling stopped abruptly. "Now listen here." The voice had lost its false friendliness. "James needs to understand that neutrality isn't an option anymore. Everyone picks a side in a war. You tell him that." "I'll convey your message," Olivia replied coldly. "Now leave." After a tense moment, she heard the men retreating, muttering curses. Through the window, she watched them mount their horses and ride away. But they only went as far as the creek, where they dismounted again and appeared to be settling in to wait. Anxiety gnawed at Olivia as the afternoon wore on. The men remained by the creek, occasionally glancing toward the cabin. If Lucas returned, he would ride right into whatever they had planned. With her injured shoulder, there was little she could do to help him if trouble started. The sun was beginning to set when Olivia heard hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. Looking out, she felt her heart sink as she saw Lucas riding toward the cabin, unaware of the men waiting by the creek. She had to warn him somehow. Moving quickly to the door, Olivia opened it just enough to call out, "Mr. James." Visitors by the creek. Lucas reacted instantly, reining his horse sharply and drawing his pistol in one fluid motion. The men by the creek scrambled for their mounts, but Lucas had already spotted them. He urged his horse into a trot, circling wide to approach the cabin from an angle that kept him from being caught between the men and the building. By the time he reached the porch, the three men had mounted up and were slowly approaching as well. "Get inside," Lucas told Olivia in a low voice. "Lucas, please," he insisted, his eyes never leaving the approaching men. Reluctantly, Olivia retreated into the cabin, but she kept the door open a crack, still holding the rifle. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Lucas called out, his voice deceptively casual. "Something I can help you with?" The apparent leader of the group, a heavy-set man with a bushy mustache, nudged his horse forward. "Lucas James, we've been waiting to have a word with you." "You could have called at the ranch if you wanted to talk," Lucas replied, "instead of frightening a lady recuperating from an injury." "We didn't know you'd taken up with the schoolmarm," the man said with a smirk. "Though I can see why you would. Pretty little thing." Lucas's expression hardened. "State your business and be on your way. Miss O'Connor needs her rest." "Our business is simple," the man said, his smirk fading. "The association wants to know where the Rocking M stands. Your boss Mullins has been playing both sides, selling beef to the homesteaders, letting them use his water rights. That ends now. Mr. Mullins makes his own decisions about his property," Lucas stated firmly. "Not anymore, he doesn't," the man retorted. "There's a meeting tomorrow night at the Silver Creek headquarters. Mullins needs to be there to declare his allegiance, or the association will consider him an enemy. You tell him that." Lucas nodded slowly. "I'll tell him. Now, if that's all." The man's eyes narrowed. "One more thing. The association doesn't look kindly on cowboys who harbor sympathizers. The schoolmarm in there, we know she's been teaching the homesteaders' brats to read. That makes her part of the problem." Lucas's hand drifted toward his holstered pistol. "Miss O'Connor teaches all the children of Wheatland, regardless of where they live or what their parents do. She's not involved in your war." "Everyone's involved now," the man growled. "You do well to remember that." He turned his horse. "Sunset tomorrow, James. Make sure Mullins is there." After the men rode away, Lucas remained on the porch for several long minutes, watching to ensure they truly left. When he finally came inside, his face was grim. "Are you all right?" he asked Olivia, taking the rifle from her trembling hands. She nodded. "They were waiting for you." "I was afraid they might." "They wouldn't have done anything," Lucas assured her, though his tone lacked conviction. "They're bullies, not killers." "The man who was shot next to me in town might disagree," Olivia pointed out. Lucas couldn't argue with that. He sighed heavily, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I need to ride out to the Rockingham first thing tomorrow, warn Mr. Mullins." "What will he do?" Olivia asked. "I don't know," Lucas admitted. "He's a proud man, doesn't like being told what to do. But the association has the money and the guns." He noticed the pot simmering on the stove for the first time. "You cooked." "I thought I'd surprise you," Olivia said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's nothing fancy, just a stew." A smile softened Lucas's features. "That's mighty kind of you. I'm not used to coming home to a hot meal cooked by someone else." The word home hung in the air between them, carrying unspoken weight. For the past week, this cabin had been home to both of them, an unexpected sanctuary in the midst of growing conflict. As they sat down to eat, Olivia found herself studying Lucas's face, the lines of worry that hadn't been there when they'd first arrived, the fatigue in his eyes. He'd been working twice as hard, caring for her while still maintaining his responsibilities to the ranch. "You know," she said quietly, "I'm well enough now to return to town. You shouldn't have to worry about me on top of everything else." Lucas looked up from his bowl, his expression serious. "Is that what you want, to go back?" The question caught Olivia off guard. The truth was, she'd grown comfortable here in this small cabin with Lucas. The thought of returning to her lonely rooms above the schoolhouse held little appeal. "I don't want to be a burden," she replied carefully. "You're not," Lucas said simply. "Having you here has been nice." It wasn't a declaration of love or even particularly poetic, but coming from the typically reserved cowboy, it spoke volumes. Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot stew. "Then I'll stay," she decided, "at least until this business with the association is resolved. Someone needs to make sure you eat proper meals." The smile that transformed Lucas's face was worth every moment of pain and discomfort she'd endured. In that instant, Olivia realized she was in danger of falling for this quiet, steadfast man who'd risked his life to save hers and asked nothing in return. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Lucas was up before sunrise, preparing to ride to the Rockingham. Olivia insisted on packing him food for the journey, working one-handed to wrap biscuits and bacon. "I'll be back by mid-afternoon," Lucas promised as he saddled his horse. "Keep the door locked. If anyone comes by, I know," Olivia interrupted with a small smile. "Rifle by the bed, stay quiet, pretend no one's home." Lucas nodded, seemingly reluctant to leave. "Miss O'Connor, Olivia," he began, then hesitated. "Yes," he took a deep breath. "If things go bad with the association, I might have to leave Wheatland for a while. If that happens, I want you to go stay with Mrs. Thornton at the hotel, not back to the schoolhouse. It's safer." The thought of Lucas having to flee sent a chill through Olivia. "Surely it won't come to that." "I hope not," he replied. "But promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," she said softly. "And you do the same." On impulse, she stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. Lucas looked down at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions she couldn't fully decipher. For a moment she thought he might say something more, or perhaps even kiss her. Instead, he simply covered her hand with his own, giving it a gentle squeeze before mounting his horse and riding away. The day stretched endlessly as Olivia waited for Lucas's return. To occupy herself, she cleaned the already tidy cabin, then attempted to mend her blood-stained dress, though the result was less than satisfactory with only one good arm. Mid-afternoon came and went with no sign of Lucas. As the shadows lengthened, Olivia's anxiety grew. What if there had been trouble at the Rockingham? What if the association men had ambushed him on the road by sunset? She was pacing the small cabin, pausing frequently to look out the window toward the road. When she finally heard hoofbeats approaching, relief flooded through her, only to turn to concern when she saw not one rider but three: Lucas, Mr. Mullins, and a young man she recognized as Bobby Mullins, the rancher's 16-year-old son. She hurried outside as they dismounted, noting the grim expressions on all three faces and the bundles tied to their saddles. "Olivia," Lucas greeted her, the worry in his eyes softening slightly at the sight of her. "We've got trouble." Mr. Mullins stepped forward, removing his hat. He was a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and a weathered face that reflected years of hard work. "Miss O'Connor, I apologize for the intrusion. I'd never impose on a lady's hospitality under normal circumstances." "What's happened?" Olivia asked. "Association men burned us out," Bobby blurted, his young face flushed with anger. "Set fire to the bunkhouse while we were in the fields. Shot two of our hands when they tried to stop them." "Dear God," Olivia whispered, her hand going to her mouth. "They're dead." She asked, hardly able to comprehend such violence. Mr. Mullins nodded grimly. "Tom Marshall and Pete Delaney. Good men, both of them. The others scattered, hiding out with friendly homesteaders." We managed to save some supplies and the horses, Lucas added. But the rocking M is effectively finished. The association wants to make an example of anyone who won't fall in line. Olivia looked at the 3 tired, dusty men standing before her. You'll all stay here tonight, she declared. I'll prepare supper while you tend to the horses. Lucas gave her a grateful look. The cabin's small, we'll manage, she interrupted firmly. No one should be alone tonight. While the men settled the horses and unpacked their meager, salvaged belongings, Olivia set about preparing the largest meal the cabin's supplies would allow. The Mullenses had brought some provisions: flour, coffee, beans, and cured meat, which supplemented what Lucas already had. As they ate around the small table, Mr. Mullins outlined what had transpired at the ranch. They came just after Lucas arrived with the warning, he explained. Must have been watching, waiting for him to deliver the message. I told them I wouldn't be dictated to on my own land, that I'd sell to whoever could pay. That's when they started shooting. We were outnumbered, Lucas added. Had to retreat to the house while they torched the bunkhouse and barn. Pa shot one of them, Bobby said, a hint of pride in his voice despite the grim circumstances. Got him right in the leg. They dragged him off, cursing something fierce. I didn't want to kill anyone, Mr. Mullins said quietly. Just wanted them off my property. But they'll be back, and next time they won't leave until the job is finished. What will you do now? Olivia asked. The older man sighed heavily. Bobby and I will head north to my brother's place in Montana. He's been asking me to join him for years. Might be time to take him up on it. And you, Lucas? Olivia couldn't keep the concern from her voice. Lucas met her gaze across the table. I need to see Mr. Mullins and Bobby safely on their way after that. He shrugged. I haven't decided. That night, sleeping arrangements were makeshift but manageable. Olivia insisted on keeping the bed, her injury still requiring a comfortable surface. Lucas made pallets on the floor for himself and the Mullinses, using blankets and bedrolls from their saddles. Despite her exhaustion, Olivia found sleep elusive. The knowledge that 2 men had died today meant she had probably passed on the street in town, perhaps even spoken to, weighed heavily on her. The range war was no longer a distant concern, but a brutal reality that had touched people she cared about. In the darkest hours of the night, she heard movement and soft voices. Peering through the darkness, she could make out Lucas and Mr. Mullins sitting by the dying embers in the stove, talking in low tones. She couldn't hear their words, but the gravity in their postures told her they were making difficult decisions. Morning brought a flurry of activity as the Mullinses prepared to depart. Mr. Mullins had decided they would leave immediately, traveling north and west, avoiding the main roads where association men might be watching. I can't thank you enough for your hospitality, Miss O'Connor, Mr. Mullins said as he prepared to mount up. And for looking after this stubborn cowboy here. He nodded toward Lucas. It was he who looked after me, Olivia replied with a smile. I wish you safe travels, Mr. Mullins. The older man lowered his voice. Lucas is a good man, one of the best I've ever had working for me. He deserves some happiness after all he's been through. Before Olivia could respond, Mr. Mullins turned to Lucas. Remember what we discussed. If you change your mind, the offer stands. Lucas nodded, shaking his former employer's hand. Godspeed, sir. After the Mullinses had ridden away, Olivia turned to Lucas. What offer was he referring to? Lucas's expression was unreadable as he gathered the breakfast dishes. He invited me to join them in Montana. His brother has a large spread, could use another experienced hand. Olivia felt her heart sink. That sounds like a good opportunity for you. It would be, Lucas agreed, his eyes meeting hers. Except I'm not sure I want to leave Wyoming or Wheatland, he paused, Or you. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as Lucas took a step toward her. I know I'm just a cowboy, he continued, his voice low and earnest. I don't have much to offer a lady like you, but these past days with you here, he gestured around the small cabin. It's felt right somehow. Like this place was waiting for you to make it a home. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. Lucas, a thunderous knock at the door interrupted whatever she had been about to say. Lucas immediately tensed, motioning for Olivia to move back as he approached the door, hand hovering near his holstered pistol. Who's there? He called. Sheriff Parker from Wheatland, came the reply. Need to speak with you, James. Lucas cautiously opened the door to reveal the sheriff standing on the porch, looking tired and dusty from the ride. Sheriff, Lucas greeted him warily. What brings you all the way out here? Bad news, I'm afraid, Sheriff Parker said, stepping inside and nodding respectfully to Olivia. Miss O'Connor, good to see you recovering. Thank you, Sheriff, she replied. What's happened? The sheriff removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. The range wars escalated. After what happened at the Rocking M yesterday, the homesteaders banded together and raided the Silver Creek headquarters last night. 3 men dead, including Harold Blackburn, the association's president. Lucas exchanged a shocked glance with Olivia. And the town? Tense. Very tense, the sheriff replied grimly. I've got deputies patrolling, but it's only a matter of time before more blood is spilled. The governor's finally sending in the cavalry from Fort Laramie, but they won't arrive for at least 2 days. What does this have to do with us? Lucas asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sheriff Parker sighed heavily. The man Mullins shot yesterday identified you, Lucas. Said you were part of the resistance. There's talk of association men coming to burn you out, just like they did the Rockingham. I'm just one man, Lucas protested. I don't pose any threat to them. Doesn't matter. They're making examples of anyone who stands against them. The sheriff turned to Olivia. And I'm sorry to say, Miss O'Connor, but your name has been mentioned as well. Some folks are saying you've been teaching the homesteaders' children ideas about property rights and such that go against the association's interests. Olivia was stunned. I teach reading and arithmetic, Sheriff, not politics. I know that, madam, but reason isn't prevailing right now. Sheriff Parker looked between them gravely. I came to warn you both. It isn't safe for you here or in town, not until the cavalry arrives and restores order. Lucas's jaw tightened. What are you suggesting, Sheriff? That you leave, at least temporarily? Head west into the mountains for a few days. I have a hunting cabin up near Medicine Bow. It's isolated, well stocked. You'd be safe there until this blows over. Olivia's mind reeled at the suggestion. To flee with Lucas, to hide away in the mountains like fugitives, it was scandalous, improper. And possibly their only option for survival. Miss O'Connor is still recovering from her injury, Lucas pointed out. The journey would be difficult. Not as difficult as facing down a dozen angry men with torches and rifles, the sheriff countered. Lucas turned to Olivia, his expression troubled. It has to be your decision. I won't force you to go if you'd rather take your chances in town. Olivia considered the situation. The town had already proven dangerous once her shoulder throbbed at the memory. And if what the sheriff said was true, she wouldn't be any safer there than here. At least in the mountains with Lucas, she'd have a chance. When would we need to leave? She asked, making her decision. As soon as possible, Sheriff Parker replied. Today, preferably. I'll escort you as far as the foothills to make sure you're not followed, then head back to town before I'm missed. Lucas nodded, already moving to gather essentials. We'll be ready in an hour. The sheriff provided directions to the cabin while Lucas and Olivia packed hurriedly. food, blankets, ammunition, medical supplies, anything they might need for several days in isolation. Lucas saddled his horse for Olivia, explaining that the mare was gentler and would provide an easier ride for her injured shoulder. For himself, he saddled the stronger gelding he'd acquired from the rocking M, loading it with their supplies. As they prepared to depart, Olivia took one last look at the small cabin that had been her sanctuary for the past week. Despite the circumstances that had brought her here, she had found an unexpected peace within these walls and perhaps the beginnings of something more precious still. "We'll come back," Lucas promised, reading her thoughts, "when it's safe." The journey to the mountains was arduous, especially for Olivia. Though her wound was healing well, the constant movement of horseback riding sent waves of pain through her shoulder. She gritted her teeth, determined not to slow their progress or show weakness. Sheriff Parker led them along little-used trails, avoiding the main roads where association men might be watching. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the foothills of the Medicine Bow Range, the terrain growing steeper and more heavily wooded. "This is where I leave you," the sheriff said, pointing toward a barely visible trail winding up the mountainside. "Follow that for about 3 miles. The cabin sits in a small clearing near a stream. Can't miss it." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lucas said, extending his hand. "We owe you." "Just doing my job," Sheriff Parker replied, shaking Lucas's hand firmly. "Keep her safe, James, and keep your head down until you hear from me. Should be no more than a few days." After the sheriff departed, Lucas and Olivia continued their climb. The trail narrowed, forcing them to ride single file through dense pine forest. Despite the circumstances, Olivia found herself appreciating the wild beauty surrounding them: towering trees, glimpses of snow-capped peaks, the occasional flutter of birds startled by their passage. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The structure was small but solidly built, nestled in a clearing beside a clear, rushing stream. A lean-to shelter stood nearby, suitable for the horses. "Wait here," Lucas instructed, dismounting and drawing his pistol. "Let me check inside first." Olivia watched anxiously as he approached the cabin, testing the door before disappearing inside. After a few tense moments, he reappeared, holstering his weapon. "All clear," he called. "Looks like no one's been here in months." With Lucas's help, Olivia dismounted, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured shoulder. He steadied her with a hand at her waist, his touch lingering longer than strictly necessary. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes. "Just tired," she admitted, "and a bit sore. Let's get you inside. I'll take care of the horses and bring in our supplies." The interior of the cabin was basic but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a small table and chairs nearby. A narrow bed stood in one corner, covered with a faded quilt. Shelves held tin plates, cups, and various supplies. A rocking chair sat before the hearth, its wooden seat worn smooth from years of use. Olivia sank gratefully into the rocking chair while Lucas busied himself with the horses and supplies. By the time he returned, bearing their saddlebags and bedrolls, darkness had fallen completely, and the cabin's interior was shrouded in shadows. "The sheriff wasn't exaggerating about the supplies," Lucas commented as he lit a lantern. "There's plenty of firewood stacked outside, and the cupboard has enough canned goods to last weeks." He set about building a fire in the hearth while Olivia watched, mesmerized by the efficient movements of his hands. As the flames caught and began to spread, golden light filled the small space, creating a cozy atmosphere despite their dire circumstances. "Are you hungry?" Lucas asked, setting a pot of water to boil over the fire. Olivia nodded, suddenly aware that they'd barely eaten all day. "I could help, you should rest," Lucas interrupted gently. "Your shoulder's been through enough today." Too weary to argue, Olivia leaned back in the rocking chair, allowing herself to be cared for. As Lucas prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork, she found herself studying him in the firelight, the strong lines of his profile, the careful precision of his movements, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he bent to stir the pot. How strange that, just over a week ago, he had been nearly a stranger to her. Now, he was the person she trusted most in the world, the one who had saved her life and continued to protect her at great risk to himself. "You're staring," Lucas observed without looking up from his cooking. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time." "For the better or worse?" he asked, glancing up at her with a hint of vulnerability in his expression. "Both, I suppose," she replied honestly. "I could have done without being shot, certainly, but—" She hesitated, gathering her courage. "I can't regret getting to know you, Lucas." A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Even though it's led to us hiding in the mountains like outlaws, even so," she confirmed, returning his smile. They ate by the fire, the crackling flames and occasional howl of a distant coyote the only sounds breaking the night's silence. Afterward, Lucas changed Olivia's bandages, his touch gentle as he examined the healing wound. "It's looking much better," he commented. "Another week or two and you'll hardly know it happened." "Except for the scar," Olivia said wryly. Lucas's fingers traced the skin near the wound, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with pain. "A reminder of your courage," he murmured. Their eyes met, and Olivia felt the air between them change, charged with an unspoken awareness. Lucas's hand still rested lightly on her shoulder, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. For a moment, she thought he might lean forward, closing the distance between them. Instead, he cleared his throat and pulled away, busying himself with tidying their supper dishes. "You should take the bed," he said, his voice slightly rough. "I'll sleep by the fire." "Lucas," Olivia began, uncertain what she wanted to say but knowing she didn't want the moment to end. "It's been a long day," he interrupted gently. "We both need rest." Reluctantly, Olivia prepared for bed, using water from the stream that Lucas had brought inside to wash her face and hands. The cabin had no privacy screens, so she simply removed her boots and outer garments, sleeping in her chemise and petticoat beneath the quilt. From her position on the bed, she could see Lucas spreading his bedroll near the fireplace, his movements illuminated by the dying flames. As he settled down for the night, he glanced over at her, catching her watching him. "Good night, Olivia," he said softly. "Good night, Lucas," she replied, pulling the quilt up to her chin and closing her eyes, though sleep remained elusive for many hours. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, sunlight filtering through the cabin's small windows. Olivia woke to find Lucas already up, tending the fire and brewing coffee. The domestic scene stirred something within her, a longing for this to be more than a temporary arrangement born of necessity. "Sleep well?" Lucas asked, pouring a cup of coffee and bringing it to her. "Well enough," she replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "And you?" he shrugged. "I've slept on harder floors." After a breakfast of biscuits and bacon, Lucas announced his intention to scout the surrounding area. "We should know all possible approaches to the cabin, just in case." "In case we're found, you mean," Olivia stated, voicing the fear they'd both been avoiding. Lucas nodded grimly. "I don't think anyone followed us, but it pays to be cautious." "I'm coming with you," Olivia declared, rising from the table. "Your shoulder is healing," she interrupted firmly. "And I refuse to sit here alone, jumping at every sound. Besides, the fresh air and exercise will do me good." Seeing the determination in her eyes, Lucas relented. "All right, but we stay together, and you tell me if you get tired." They spent the morning exploring the area around the cabin, discovering a small meadow filled with wildflowers, a rocky outcropping that provided a view of the valley below, and a deeper pool in the stream that Lucas declared would be perfect for fishing. Olivia found herself enjoying the wilderness more than she'd expected, breathing deeply of the pine-scented air and delighting in the antics of squirrels and chipmunks darting through the undergrowth. By unspoken agreement, they avoided discussing the situation in Wheatland or what might happen when they eventually returned. Here, in this mountain sanctuary, they existed in a bubble of time separate from the violence and politics of the Range War. As they walked back toward the cabin, Lucas suddenly stopped, holding up a hand for silence. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Olivia listened intently, hearing nothing but the rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. "What is it?" "Horses," Lucas replied, his expression tense. "More than one." Coming up the trail, fear gripped Olivia's heart. "The association men, or the sheriff," Lucas said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Either way, we need to get back to the cabin. Stay close." Moving as quietly as possible through the underbrush, they made their way back to the clearing. Lucas retrieved his rifle from inside the cabin, then positioned himself and Olivia behind a large pine with a clear view of the approach trail. "If trouble starts," he murmured, "run for the cabin, bar the door, and use the back window to escape into the forest. Head west, always uphill. There's another trail that leads over the mountain to the next valley." "I'm not leaving you," Olivia protested. Lucas turned to her, his expression grave. "Promise me, Olivia, please." Something in his eyes, a mixture of determination and fear, not for himself but for her, made Olivia nod reluctantly. "I promise." They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, 3 riders appeared on the trail, moving cautiously into the clearing. Olivia felt Lucas tense beside her, raising the rifle slightly, then relax as recognition dawned. "It's Sheriff Parker," he said with obvious relief. "And Doc Wilson. Don't know the third man." They stepped out from behind the tree, Lucas keeping his rifle lowered but ready as they approached the newcomers. "Sheriff," he called out, "wasn't expecting you so soon." Sheriff Parker dismounted, looking weary but satisfied. "Brought good news, so I figured it was worth the ride." The cavalry arrived early from Fort Laramie, rode straight through without stopping when they heard how bad things had gotten. "And the Range War?" Olivia asked anxiously. "Over or near enough," the sheriff replied. "The ringleaders of both sides are in custody, including the men who burned out the Rockingham. The rest have scattered or laid down arms." Relief washed over Olivia. "So we can go home." "That's why we're here," Dr. Wilson spoke up, dismounting as well. "To escort you back safely and check on that shoulder of yours, Miss O'Connor." The third rider, who had remained on his horse, finally spoke up. "And to deliver some news that couldn't wait, apparently." Lucas squinted up at the man. "Judge Harmon, what brings you all the way up here?" The judge, a dignified older man with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard, dismounted with a slight grimace. "Saddle's harder on my backside than it used to be," he complained good-naturedly. "But yes, I have news that particularly concerns Miss O'Connor." Olivia stepped forward, apprehension replacing her relief. "What is it, Judge?" "It's about the school board, my dear," Judge Harmon explained. "When word got out that you were staying unchaperoned with Mr. James Certain, concerns were raised about your suitability as a teacher." Olivia felt as though she'd been struck. "They want to dismiss me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some did," the judge confirmed. "Led by Mrs. Hawkins, who's had her eye on your position for her niece from St. Louis." Lucas moved to Olivia's side, his expression thunderous. That's outrageous. Miss O'Connor was shot, for God's sake. Was she supposed to bleed to death rather than accept help from a man? Judge Harmon held up a placating hand. I quite agree, young man, which is why I called an emergency session of the town council. We voted unanimously to override the school board's objections, provided. He paused, clearing his throat. Provided certain proprieties are observed going forward. Meaning what exactly? Lucas demanded. The judge exchanged glances with Sheriff Parker and Dr. Wilson. Meaning that if you two wish to continue your association, it should be within the bounds of matrimony. Stunned silence followed this pronouncement. Olivia felt her face flush with heat, unable to look at Lucas or anyone else. Marriage. The very thought sent her heart racing, though whether from fear or anticipation, she couldn't say. Now see here, Lucas finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. You can't force Miss O'Connor to marry anyone, not even me, just to satisfy some small town gossips. Of course not, Judge Harmon agreed readily. I'm merely presenting the situation as it stands. Miss O'Connor can certainly return to her position unmarried, but she would need to find alternate living arrangements immediately and maintain an impeccable reputation going forward. That's hardly fair, Dr. Wilson commented. The poor girl was shot, then threatened by association men. Where exactly was she supposed to go? I don't make the rules of society, Doctor, the judge replied with a sigh. I'm merely explaining them. Throughout this exchange, Olivia remained silent, her mind whirling with implications. She'd come west seeking independence, determined to make her own way in the world after losing her parents. The teaching position in Wheatland had offered that opportunity, along with a respect she'd worked hard to earn. To have it all threatened now, because of circumstances beyond her control. I need some air, she said abruptly, turning and walking toward the stream without waiting for a response. Behind her, she heard Lucas say something to the men, then footsteps following her. She didn't turn, continuing until she reached the bank of the stream where she stood watching the clear water tumble over rocks, trying to order her chaotic thoughts. Olivia, Lucas's voice came softly from behind her. I don't need your pity, Lucas, she said without turning. Good, because I'm not offering any. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the water rather than at her. What I am offering is a solution if you want it. Now she did turn to look at him. Marriage, you mean? Because the town council demands it, Lucas shook his head. No, because I was already thinking about asking you long before they showed up. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. What? Why do you think I didn't take Mullins's offer to go to Montana? Lucas asked quietly. It was a good opportunity, better than anything waiting for me in Wheatland with the rocking M gone, but I couldn't leave, not without knowing if there might be something between us. He turned to face her fully now, his expression more open and vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. I know it hasn't been long, and maybe I'm a fool for even suggesting it. You're educated, refined, you could have any man you wanted. I'm just a cowboy with a small piece of land and not much else to offer. Lucas, Olivia began, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, please. I need to say this. He took a deep breath. That day in town when the shooting started and I saw you fall, I've never been so scared in my life. Not for myself, but at the thought of losing you before I'd even really known you. And these past days, having you in my home, talking with you, seeing your strength and your kindness. I've fallen in love with you, Olivia O'Connor. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned as the man himself. Olivia felt tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of an emotion so powerful it threatened to overwhelm her. If you don't feel the same, Lucas continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I understand. I'll take you back to town, and we'll find a way to protect your reputation without you having to tie yourself to me. But if there's any chance that you might someday come to care for me as I care for you," Olivia didn't let him finish. Moving forward, she placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her palm. "I already do," she whispered. "Care for you, I mean. Perhaps even love you, though it terrifies me to admit it." Hope blazed in Lucas's eyes. "It does?" "Yes," she admitted. "I've always been so determined to be independent, to never need anyone. But then you carried me out of that gunfight, and you've been carrying me in one way or another ever since. Not because you think I'm weak, but because you're strong enough to help without demanding anything in return." She took a shaky breath. "I don't want to marry you because the town council says I must, but I think I would very much like to marry you because my heart says I should." The smile that transformed Lucas's face was like sunrise after the darkest night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, reverent almost, but with a current of deeper feeling that made Olivia's knees weak. When they finally parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes, then?" he murmured. Olivia laughed softly. "Yes, Lucas James, that's a yes." Hand in hand, they returned to the cabin, where the three visitors waited with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. One look at their faces, however, told the story clearly enough. "Well," Judge Harmon said, a smile creasing his weathered features, "it appears I may have a wedding to perform sooner rather than later." "If you're willing, Judge," Lucas confirmed, his hand tightening around Olivia's. "Though we'd like to do it properly in town with friends present." Of course," the judge agreed readily. "Say this Sunday after church. That would give Miss O'Connor time to arrange a suitable dress and allow word to spread so the townspeople can attend." Dr. Wilson cleared his throat. "And it would thoroughly silence any remaining gossip, which I suspect was your intention all along, you old schemer." Judge Harmon attempted to look offended, but the twinkle in his eye gave him away. "I merely presented the facts of the situation. If love happened to follow, well, that's hardly my doing." Sheriff Parker, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "I hate to interrupt this touching moment, but we should head back to town before dark. Path gets tricky in the twilight." As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the mountain cabin, Olivia felt a curious mixture of emotions. The past 2 weeks had been the most chaotic and frightening of her life, yet also the most transformative. She had come to Wyoming seeking independence, and had found instead an interdependence that felt stronger, more sustaining than standing alone had ever been. The ride back to Wheatland was long but uneventful. True to the sheriff's word, the town appeared calm, though there were signs of the recent conflict, a burned storefront being rebuilt, men with bandaged injuries sitting outside the saloon, a cavalry patrol riding slowly down the main street. Lucas insisted on taking Olivia directly to Mrs. Thornton's hotel rather than to her rooms above the schoolhouse. "Just until Sunday," he explained as he helped her dismount. "After that, you can decide whether you want to live at my place or keep your rooms in town during the school week. You would let me continue teaching?" Olivia asked, somewhat surprised. "Let you?" Lucas repeated with a raised eyebrow. "Olivia, I'd never presume to tell you what you can or can't do. I know how much your independence means to you. I'm just offering to stand beside you, not in your way." In that moment, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision. This quiet cowboy understood her in a way no one else ever had, not as a delicate flower needing protection, nor as a bluestocking too educated for her own good, but simply as Olivia, with all her strengths and vulnerabilities intact. "I love you, Lucas James," she said softly, not caring who might overhear in the busy street. He smiled, tipping his hat to her. "And I love you, Olivia O'Connor, soon to be Olivia James if I'm the luckiest man in Wyoming territory." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Mrs. Thornton, delighted by the romance of it all, helped Olivia alter her best dress for the wedding. The ladies of the town, many of whom had initially been scandalized by the situation, quickly rallied around once they understood the circumstances and saw the obvious affection between the couple. Lucas, meanwhile, worked from dawn till dusk repairing and improving his small homestead. With help from some of the men in town, he added a proper bedroom to the cabin and expanded the porch. He purchased new curtains and dishes, determined that Olivia would have a home she could be proud of. The day before the wedding, Mr. and Mrs. Mullins returned unexpectedly from their journey north, having heard the news from a passing rider. "Couldn't let my best hand get married without being there," Mr. Mullins declared, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "Besides, I've got a proposition for you." The proposition, it turned out, involved the remains of the Rockingham. Rather than rebuild alone, Mr. Mullins proposed a partnership with Lucas, combining their resources to create a new ranch that would raise cattle, but also grow crops on part of the land, a middle way that might help heal the division in the community. "I've had my fill of Montana already," Mr. Mullins admitted. "Too cold and my brother's cooking is terrible. Wyoming's home, for better or worse." Lucas, overwhelmed by the offer, insisted on discussing it with Olivia before giving an answer. When he did, she surprised him with her enthusiasm. "It's perfect," she declared. "You can continue the work you love, and with a partnership the hours might be more reasonable than working for someone else. Plus, we could expand our own place gradually." "Our place," Lucas repeated, savoring the words. "I still can't quite believe this is happening." Olivia touched his cheek gently. "Believe it. Tomorrow I become your wife and we start building our life together." Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, as if nature itself approved of the union about to take place. The small church in Wheatland was filled to capacity, with townspeople, homesteaders, and even a few cowboys from neighboring ranches in attendance. Lucas stood at the altar, nervous but determined, wearing a new suit purchased for the occasion. When Olivia appeared at the back of the church, a simple bouquet of wildflowers in her hands and her copper hair gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the windows, he felt his heart nearly stop. She was radiant, her honey-colored eyes finding his immediately as she began her walk down the aisle. Mr. Mullins, standing in for her deceased father, escorted her proudly, but Lucas hardly noticed anyone else in the room. For him, there was only Olivia, moving toward him with steady steps, a smile that matched his own spreading across her face. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. Judge Harmon, officiating with appropriate gravity, led them through their vows. When Lucas slipped the simple gold band onto Olivia's finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother, carefully preserved all these years, he saw tears shimmering in her eyes. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Judge Harmon declared. "You may kiss your bride." Lucas didn't need to be told twice. Drawing Olivia into his arms, he kissed her with all the love and promise he felt for their future together. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with feasting and dancing at the hotel. Lucas, never much for socializing, found himself enjoying the festivities more than he'd expected, especially the opportunity to hold his new wife close during the dancing. "Happy," he murmured into Olivia's ear as they swayed together to a slow tune. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, her head resting against his shoulder. "And you?" I got shot at, burned out of my job, and had to hide in the mountains, Lucas recounted with mock seriousness. And somehow ended up with the most beautiful, intelligent woman in Wyoming territory agreeing to be my wife. I'd say that's a fair trade. Olivia laughed, the sound warming Lucas's heart. When you put it that way, it does sound rather adventurous. Just the beginning of our adventure, Lucas promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I hope the next chapter involves fewer bullets. As the evening drew to a close, they slipped away from the celebration, eager for privacy after the long public day. Lucas drove the wagon he'd borrowed for the occasion slowly through the quiet town and out onto the road leading to their homestead. Olivia nestled against his side. The cabin looked different in the moonlight, more substantial somehow, with its new additions and the soft glow of lamps visible through the windows. Mrs. Thornton had insisted on going ahead to prepare the house for the newlyweds, and as Lucas helped Olivia down from the wagon, they could see she had outdone herself. Fresh flowers adorned the porch, and when they stepped inside, they found more flowers on the table, along with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Home," Lucas said simply, watching Olivia's face as she took in the transformed cabin. "Home," she agreed, turning to face him with eyes full of love and promise. "Our home." Lucas gathered her gently into his arms, mindful of her still healing shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed. "Someone to come home to, someone to build a life with. I'd resigned myself to being alone." "So had I," Olivia admitted, her hands resting on his chest. "I thought independence meant never needing anyone. Now I understand that true strength comes from choosing to be with someone, not from being alone." "And you choose me?" Lucas asked, a hint of wonder still in his voice. "Every day," Olivia assured him, rising on tiptoe to brush her lips against his. "For as long as we both shall live." In the years that followed, Lucas and Olivia James would face many challenges together: droughts and blizzards, the ups and downs of ranching life, the continuing evolution of Wyoming territory into statehood. They would welcome children, first a son, then twin daughters who inherited their mother's copper hair and their father's steady determination. The partnership with Mr. Mullins would prove successful, eventually becoming one of the most respected operations in the region, known for fair practices and innovation. Olivia would continue teaching for several years before eventually opening a small library adjacent to the schoolhouse, fulfilling a dream she'd harbored since arriving in Wheatland. Lucas would serve on the town council, and later as a respected mediator in land disputes, his reputation for fairness making him trusted by both ranchers and farmers. But through all the changes and challenges, one thing remained constant: the love that had begun in the chaos of a range war, when a stray bullet found an innocent schoolteacher and a quiet cowboy happened to be near enough to help. A love forged in danger and cemented in trust. A love that proved stronger than violence, more enduring than conflict. A love that had begun with a single moment of courage, when Lucas James carried Olivia O'Connor to safety, never imagining he was carrying his own future in his arms.